So I purchased a Sega Genesis component cable by HD Retrovision since they recently became available, and wanted to talk about why I wanted to try one of these out. My retro setup has primarily consisted of using SCART cables purchased from the eBay seller Retro Console Accessories, and scaled to my big screen TV using an xRGB Framemeister. To display on my CRT, I would either use a SCART 2 component transcoder or the S-Video port. Problem with this is either being the transcoder having to be opened up and calibrated to get the colors correct, or the Sega Genesis not even supporting S-Video without modifying the console. I planned on picking up a SCART switcher, which I planned on outputting the video signal to both the Framemeister and CRT at the same time. However, with HD Retrovision component cables over SCART, this opens up a lot more options for different switchers, no need for transcoders, using different extension cables, and just loads of various other convenient reasons. Because each cable basically has their own separate transcoder circuit built in, I want to do a test to see how much I could tell the difference between those cables versus the SCART cables and use a different setup versus my current setup. I picked up a set for the Genesis Model 2 along with a Model 1 Genesis adapter and a Sega Saturn adapter, so I could test at least 3 different consoles through my Framemeister on my big screen TV, also directly to the TV itself and to my RCA CRT television, as well as a comparison with 2 SCART cables through the Framemeister. So basically I want to do like an extra HD Retrovision component cables comparison to the SCART cables themselves. I'm using Framemeister profiles downloaded from the Pixel Purist, with the Saturn profile slightly modified to look better on my plasma TV. The tests in this video when using both the SCART and component cables are using those same profile settings with the exception of the component output, but it's basically the same values. Keep in mind, if you have a Framemeister and you're using HD Retrovision component cables, you need a D-terminal to component adapter for the Framemeister because there's no direct component ports on the Framemeister itself, which I already have one of these to use my PSP with the Framemeister. Also, the HD Retrovision component cables do not upscale the resolution and still output a native 240p. Using them directly into a component input on your modern television without an external scaler, the compatibility may vary depending on your TV. So if you go to the manufacturer's website, they'll actually have a list of TVs that people have submitted on what can be compatible and what isn't. The first console I tested was my Sega Saturn. Plugging directly into the TV makes for a great low-cost alternative, eliminating the need for the Framemeister or any other scaler. But keep in mind, like I said earlier, not every TV supports this. So my TV was compatible with it, but didn't display it at the native 240p, and instead read it and displayed it as 480i, but still looked good nonetheless. I next plugged it into my CRT television, and as you can see right away, there was a huge improvement over composite and a nice little step up from when I would normally use S-Video. If you primarily use a CRT for retro gaming, you're probably just happy with S-Video, which S-Video still looks great, but if you want the best picture possible on an American CRT, this is probably going to be your best option. So for the final test with the Sega Saturn, I plugged the component cables into the Framemeister, and I was extremely impressed with the results. When I compared this to SCART, I honestly could not tell a difference between the two. I think I like the HD Retrovision component cables a little bit better with the Saturn. Also, each HD Retrovision cable has a contrast switch on the cable itself to brighten the signal in case it's too dark in your television. For using these cables on the Sega Saturn, it's pretty much required compared to all the other tests. But yeah, it looks great. For comparison, here's the SCART cables going to the Framemeister, and even using SCART cables, they both look great. They both look amazing with the Sega Saturn. Next, I decided to test the HD Retrovision cables with my Model 1 Sega Genesis. My Panasonic Plasma TV would not display the 240p signal from the Genesis, even at 480i like the Saturn did. So I instead tested it on my 32-inch Sony TV, and that had no issues. But just like the Plasma, the TV also interlaces the signal and displays it at 480i, but it still looks really good. Next, I plugged into the CRT, and this practically gives the Sega Genesis a whole new life. The Model 1 Genesis was famous for having horrible video quality using composite cables, but it's not an issue at all if you use xRGB SCART, and it's definitely not an issue if you're using these component cables as well. Keep in mind, the Genesis is not capable of outputting S-video without modifying the console. And finally, I plugged the component cables into the Framemeister, and like before, I was equally impressed with the quality of the component cables. Again, I'm using the same settings from the Pixel Purist profile, and I would just take those values and just make a whole new value for the component output with the same settings. Here's the same thing, but using my existing SCART cables. And to me, they look identical on the TV. I mean, both the component cables and the SCART cables. Others may have noticed a difference between these two, but I haven't. And I actually think these cables are now a better option just due to the convenience of the AV connectors. Because you can just use cheap mechanical component switchers or AV switchers if you have multiple consoles. And now for the final test with this cable, I'm going to use the HD Retrovision cables on my Sega 32X, since that console uses the same video cables as the Model 2 Genesis. Like the Genesis on the Panasonic Plasma, that TV did not like the display signal, but my Sony TV had no problems displaying it, but again, this was also at 480i. Still looks good at 480i, but it would have been nicer to have it displayed at a native 240p. So then I plugged in the CRT television, and the 32X graphics look amazing like the last two tests. Again, like the Sega Genesis, either the Model 1 or Model 2, the 32X does not output native S-video. And finally, the component cable is plugged in the Framemeister. Again, I could not see any difference between the quality of the SCART cables versus the component cables. And just a side note, you're probably going to see a little bit of video signal noise with the 32X captures in this video. That's actually my 32X system, which probably needs some capacitors replaced or something inside the system. It's not the cables themselves, because both cables have that problem. I even had the same problem with my Mortal Kombat 2 Let's Play video. Here's a comparison with the SCART cables, and the two signals look identical to me when hooking up to the Framemeister. So after doing all these tests, I ordered additional sets of the HD Retrovision component cables for each of my consoles that could support it. My intention was to switch out all my SCART cables in favor of these component cables so I can simplify my setup. I don't need a transcoder to hook up to this CRT. I don't need a SCART switcher. I can instead use a component switcher, which, like I said, opens up a lot more options for different various switchers. So after receiving the new order, I was able to test out my Super Nintendo with the HD Retrovision component cables. Unfortunately, neither of my HD TVs would accept the Super Nintendo's video signal when plugged directly into the TV. I kind of expected this because the Super Nintendo kind of has a lower native refresh rate, which is the same reason why the OSSC kind of has trouble with it on some TVs. The CRT television, however, had no issues, which I expected, and it looked great. In fact, I don't think Super Nintendo games have looked better playing on this CRT TV. And for the comparison through the Framemeister, the HD Retrovision component cables did not disappoint with the Super Nintendo. I am super happy with this purchase. And with the comparison using SCART cables, I did notice a slight brightness and color difference. I mean, I didn't even notice until I was editing the video. I mean, this color difference and brightness difference can be adjusted using your Framemeister settings or even the settings on your TV. Like I said, I'm perfectly happy with them. So these cables go for over $50 for either the Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis Model 2 console, with each adapter being sold for anywhere between $8 to $14 depending on the adapter. So you're paying a little bit more than you are for a SCART cable for convenience, even for a good SCART cable. However, you're eliminating the need for a SCART to component transcoder if you're hooking up to a CRT. So what do you think about these cables? With all the RGB SCART options that are available now, are you guys happier sticking with SCART, or do you think it's more convenient to go with the HD Retrovision component? For any of you guys that have used both, do you guys see any difference in the quality compared to what I posted earlier? Or what do you guys use on your gaming setups? I'm kind of curious to know what everyone else uses, or whether they just stick with this video. So please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please click subscribe. Please click on the little bell icon next to subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Thank you and take care.